Good morning once again. The Ghanaian Times starts this morning and says massive fraud uncovered at YEA. Audit report reveals millions of cedis paid to ghost and won't stop fight against Galamsey President reaffirming there. And then also on the Ghanaian Times, $2.25 billion bond was issued in transparent manner. Finance Minister. The news today continues the story of the rot at the YEA and the Daily Guide, massive rot at YEA. That's how it captures it. And the minister blast NDC over $2.25 billion bond. I didn't kill soldier, nursing mother nabbed. The Heritage carries the bond story. Other stories on the Heritage, school named after IGP's grandpa in a mess. And then the Statesman has that story of the Youth Employment Agency there, 50 million payroll fraud. BNI were told is on the heels of corporates. Then the Today newspaper has the same story. The Daily Graphic, payroll fraud uncovered at YEA. That's how it captures it. And the new driving license out from July 18. And lawyer Sosu files appeal against suspension. The finance minister defends $2.25 billion bond. We'll certainly talk about that story in Parliament yesterday, where the finance minister responded to some allegations made against him in the $2.25 billion bond. Let's go to Parliament and follow what happened there. We'll come back and I'll let you know who my guests are to begin the conversation.
On May 31, 2017, the minority leader filed a half-hour motion requesting the finance minister to provide details of the $2.25 billion bond, including its issuance, the participants, utilization of the proceeds, and the currency in which the bond was settled. The minister was in the House Wednesday to respond, but there was near drama when the minister was asked to give his statement. The minority leader wanted the minister to apprise the House with documents before proceeding with his presentation, but the majority leader disagreed. The finance minister in his presentation said there was no breach in issuing the bond, stating the allegation out in the public domain was born out of lack of understanding of the process.
The advantage of opening up to external investors is that they bring in their hard currency to purchase the bonds in our local currency. This has a positive impact of helping to strengthen the city. The high participation of external investors who brought in considerable foreign exchange through their custodian banks has created the false impression to some that it was a US dollar denominated bond.
He said due process was followed and 600 million cedis were saved.
Out of the total amount raised, about 2.5 billion has been used to reprofile the debt and 1.1 billion used to finance the budget. We will continue to use the remaining amount to reprofile the debt. We have seen a gradual decline in interest rates, and that accounts for the savings that we are going to get.
He dispelled claims that foreign firm Franklin Templeton alone took up 95% of the bond, adding 90% of a 10-year bond issued in November 2016, but the previous government was taken up by foreign firms and that the transaction under him has not changed.
The Ministry of Finance, in the issue of the bonds in question, had no direct dealings with the investors. There were no breaches of integrity, either on government's part or on the joint book runner's part.
And that was what transpired in Parliament yesterday. My guest to do the talking this morning to my extreme left is a group president of Wealth Vision Financial Services Limited, Mr. David Wako. Good morning, Mr. Wako.
Good morning.
Hope you're doing great.
Sure.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Okay. And then to my left is a senior lecturer, University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Lord Mensah. Good morning, too.
Good morning.
Hope you're doing great.
Good morning. I'm doing
Thanks
fine.
so much for joining us, too. Now, let's begin from this story about the bond that was issued by the finance minister. Probably the first thing he did when he got into office, and that attracting a lot of commentary. Dr. Lord Mensah, let me begin with you. Some have suggested that the back and forth, the push to continue to talk about this could in a way affect the kind of confidence the investor out there would have, or the way they will look at our business environment?
That's a very good observation from those who are looking out for such a situation where the information that is put out there would dent, the image of our business environment. But I would say the investor thrives on, more or less information. So for a bond to be more or less, I would call this bond a private placement kind of bond because of the processes that it was issued and then the number of bidders that were able to, buy into the bond. So for a bond to be private, more or less placement, and then we end up having an information coming in public like that. Now the investor, if you are processing, that kind of information, you're going to look at it and say, hey, even though this bond was more or less synonymous to a private placement kind of bond, but then there's an information out there which shows that at least we are growing in how we receive our information in this country. So it's not the information that is coming out, but then it is how the investor will process it. Now, for some, I presume this is an opportunity for them to realize that after all, Ghana, whatever is hidden always comes out. And finance, thrives in such environment where, hidden information is able to diffuse itself quickly into the public.
So that's positive then?
That's a positive, direction for this country. So you cannot dissociate that. And this also boils down to the law. More so going to parliament, where you look at finance, and then the environment that the finance is operating, the law is also working because we didn't, look at it as a country and then we some direct, action towards the finance minister. But then we saw the channels, where, financial malfeasances can be channeled through. And so these are structures in the system, and more or less, I would say that, businesses thrives in an environment where finance moves together coupled with the law and how information diffuses to the public. So it is a positive
it's a
signal
positive
to the country.
signal. But Mr. Waku, let us look at the business environment, transparency, transacting businesses in an open environment. How will it work towards the kind of economy we want to have in this part of the world, where we seem to, some seem to suggest that businesses at that level are done, shrouded in secrecy. How does transparency opens our economy to the rest of the world?
Thank you very much, and good morning to our cherished listeners. I think this issue of the bond and the way we are carrying it, especially the media point, the political point, and the technical point, when you put all together, like my brother said, if you are not careful, it's not going to help us as a nation to develop. And when I look at this critically, what I say is that, one, all the issues about this bond is either about issue of procurement or the issue of what's the name? Issue of
you go on.
Yes.
Go on.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other issue, procurement, we are talking about the laws that guide or the guidelines that guide the issuance of our bonds. This is a law. This is a guidelines. This is how it must be done. It is clear. If there is any problem with it, the various authorities or the authorities are there, which the politicians are doing. If you found anything that is not comply with as far as the procurement or the value for money is concerned, you have a right to come out with it. But the way we go about some of these things, we need to look at, technically looking at bond. What is the purpose of issuing bonds? Two main purposes. One, either for debt management purposes for the nation or to help development processes. So why are we moving away from these two main purposes and rather using the technical issues or things that we think are affecting, or they are issues that will rather affect us negatively as a nation. We rather want to project that. We are pursuing that, and the media is hitting on that, trying to destroy everything. At the end of the day, the nation will suffer. At the end of the day, we are destroying our future with the global market issue as we are talking about. The world is a small place today. Everything we are saying here today can get to every corner of this world in the next minute. Why do we want to do that to our country? The issue of transparency is important. The law is clear, the guidelines are clear. If something is not done right, whoever is a culprit must be dealt with on that. But let's look at the technicality of it. Let's look at the importance of this bond. Is it important for nation building? Is it important for our debt management system that we want to adopt? Anything that is not good about it, let's deal with it privately and look forward as a nation, build our country, prepare a future for generations that will follow, so that Ghana can develop.
All right, Mr. Wako, I'm grateful, but let me introduce Mr. Joe Jackson. He's just joined us. Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope you're doing great.
I'm doing fantastic.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us. We've been talking about the bond and the fact that the concerns are that, well, what is being discussed openly in a way, whether positive or negative, might affect the Ghanaian economy. What do you think? Mr. Lord Mensah thinks that some positive things can come out of the way we're discussing this.
Well, to some extent, yes. That it's good for us to be able to take the bond and say, was it done in a transparent manner? But you see, also, if you keep harping at this in a partisan manner, in a way in which there's no real discourse as to whether it was transparent or not, but now it is just because I'm on one side of the divide or the other side of the divide, then we're doing something detrimental to this country. So the initial discourse was fine. It's good to see clarification. Sure. Was the bond denominated in cedis? Was it denominated in dollars? What was the process? All that is fine. But the challenge I have now is that we've gone beyond that. Those questions have been answered. If they are not answered to your satisfaction, please go ahead and take the appropriate remedy through the right channels that you can. If they have, then let's move on to new things. But there seems to be some idea that there was something wrong without any real evidence being adduced. It's just a tenuous link. This gentleman is connected to Franklin Templeton. This gentleman is connected to the data bank. The Minister of Finance is in between. There is something wrong. Why has nobody spoken to the banks involved and let the bank say that the book runners? If I'm a financial institution and I was involved, I want somebody to be able to say to me, I've interviewed you and you think there was something wrong or something not wrong. But all of a sudden there's this, and it's impugning even the integrity of the book runners.
Is it too much for the banks themselves to come out, perhaps with statements, even if they are not being questioned about?
The thing is, there's this issue, also this issue about, your banker, there's some amount of confidentiality. But this is I think we're now bordering on the realm of ridiculous. The minister was invited to Parliament. He adduced some information. Somebody says, I don't believe it. It can't end there. We can't take, you see, what upsets me is this partisanship is what is killing this country. If there's a problem, state it. If there's no problem, leave it and let's move on. We have big and mighty issues. As we sit today, there's a storm in the cocoa industry that should affect us. Nobody is saying anything about it. I'll be honest with you. This is much ado at this moment. On the evidence adduced, seems to me much ado about nothing.
I see.
Let's move on as a country to new things. There's the army worm. It threatens to devastate our Greek. Nothing is being said. Nothing is being done. There's the debt overhang over the whole financial sector. Nothing. This bond is done. This same company was part of, in the old regime, bought significant quantities of these bonds. Under the,
it doesn't mean that they cannot do wrong this time.
No, you see, it's a tough one to tell me that when I do something with you that and follow the same process, it is okay. When I do it with somebody else following the same process, just because it's under a new king, then all of a sudden that whole process now devolves into something that is so wrong, and consuming huge amounts of time, energy. I want you to discuss more of the issues that should concern us. We are facing imminent starvation. We are facing a massive drop in our cocoa production. Those are things that should concern each one of us. This one, there's no new evidence. Nothing new has come to the fore since I first spoke about this on a Saturday over a month ago.
I see.
No new evidence. No, okay, it's been sent to the US for insider trading. Let's wait
and see what happens.
Let's see what happens. But unless something comes from there, for me, and even then, I'm wondering, this is our matter. What is all this now? The US people have to come and tell me what is happening here. Are rules not good enough? Is this okay? Anyway, it's the privilege of the opposition party to send this issue to the US. Maybe the US has better laws than we do. Maybe they are more smarter people to investigate this issue than we do. Maybe. But as I sit down, no new evidence has been adduced. Nothing has happened.
I see. Dr. Mensah, so the one key question answered yesterday by the finance minister was the fact that the bond was denominated and issued in Ghana cedis. Is the critics of the finance minister, are they right in suggesting that if the bond was issued in cedis, the minister has come out to say that it has gone to shore up our international reserves? Perhaps there's some little confusion in that. Is there anything confusion about that?
It is a local bond issued in cedis, but then in the end, the conversion is used to get it in dollars from the bondholders. Let me put it that way. So at the end of the day, let me chip in this from where Mr. Jackson left off. But there's no new issue here. But then the minority in a way has a case, but it's the way they are approaching the case, I believe. Because if you look at it carefully, we're having a bond that there's kind of concentration in terms of those who can hold the bond. So you ask yourself the market gauge on this bond. How the issue was related to the market,
right.
More or less looking at the ideal pricing of the bond. Very, very important, very, very critical. But then on the other hand, we shouldn't forget the history in terms of relationship that we have as a country with Franklin Templeton's investment. Now, this is an entity that is managing people's investment. So the money that Templeton is investing in Ghana is not a throwaway money.
Right.
We should note that. It's somebody's pension. It's somebody's property investment. So at the end of the day, Templeton is specializing in frontier markets, at the same time emerging market investment, looking at the returns that it can get from here. Now, Templeton also sensed, the political danger in the environment that it is investing. Okay. Now, Templeton has a history with Ghana from 2007, since we went on the bond market.
On the bond market.
More or less looking at, for instance, owning about 40% of about most of our issues, sometimes 50% of most of our issues. But now he's able to leap to what? 95%.
95%.
Then you ask yourself, what's the communication there? Is it because Templeton has developed some confidence in our economy, or as a result of a predetermined interest rate that he thinks in the next 15 years, holding that 19.75 will more or less, keep my investment safe. Now, this is a government that has been in power for, let's say, 6 months now.
Right.
And look at how interest rate has suddenly dropped. Okay. Now, this bond is 19.75. Now, I presume in the next 4 years, okay, if my forecast should be right, interest rate is going to drop to somewhere 15, looking at the policies that this government is rolling out. Now, I'm trying to think about the packaging of this bond, okay? Whether, if interest rate drops to that level, more or less holding a 19.75, it's a loss to the nation. So, if the indenture, if I say indenture, is a contract, okay, between Ghana and Templeton, should be made public, so that we can ascertain whether, all these provisions if interest rate drops so low in our environment, and we are paying paying so high, we should have a provision to, call this bond. But then in the end, that boils down to the interest rate that we are paying now, whether it's a realistic interest rate or not.
I see.
Okay, so those are the technicalities we need to look at. So at the end of the day, I think the minority can look at it from more technical perspective rather than politicizing the whole issue, thinking I should have gained or I should have lost.
Yes. So, Mr. Waku, then from what Dr. Mensah has just said, then making the contract available for us is key in this whole situation.
The question is available to who? To the public or to the one parliament who demands for it?
To the public.
Because
the critics of the
stakeholders in the country, so you can make them available.
The critics of the finance minister are saying, for instance, yesterday, the minority said that what they were looking for, they didn't get it. He didn't bring the documents they were looking for.
Yeah, so I think, fine, minority or parliament has a right to call for any documentation they want.
Yeah, of course.
But he went there yesterday, he didn't bring that. That's according to the minority.
Yes, so they go ahead and pursue it and get it. But it is not meant for public consumption. I don't think every transaction must be made too public because of a lot of reasons. Anybody can.
You are using the public as a collateral.
Using
Ghana as a collateral.
Yes,
thinking about the resources that we have.
Yes,
that's why you're borrowing on.
Agree, but this is not the. Is this the only bond that Ghana has issued before?
Yes.
Assuming the players are many or varied, what are the implications? Do we just have to expose every technical document to the public? Because the public is paying for it.
Is there a danger in exposing it?
There's a danger in it.
There is?
Yes. From banking point of view, there are a lot of transactions that happens. Like you asked, either my brother or somebody stated earlier on, in banking, you must keep the secret of every customer. Your clients. If you just start exposing everybody's technical document to the public, I don't think it's going to help us in any way. You asked a question earlier on as to the amount being paid in dollars.
Yes. We've been told it's a cedi-denominated bond.
Yes.
And the minority's concern was that the finance minister is suggesting that the bond has gone to shore up our international reserves. And they're asking questions. Yes. If the bond is in cedis,
no, he's bringing dollars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
that's the question. Mr. Joe Jackson is tragic, but you wrap up for me. Let me keep it.
Yes. Rightly, like we said, Templeton doesn't work in Ghana, or he doesn't earn income in Ghana, or their funds are not in Ghana.
He's earning our interest rate.
because, like you said rightly, every money, the value, every businessman is looking for value for his investment. Yeah. So nobody, if that money is not invested in Ghana, it will be invested in any other market for value. And he's managing people's funds. That's all we all do, even in our small way. You must always get value for that, and that is all you want to do. The money is paid in US dollars because they don't work here or the money they have is in dollars. Once it's paid in that currency, it increases our reserves somehow. If Ghana need to use the money in Ghana, we denominate it into Ghana cedis. The other side is if the bond matures and we want to pay, we're going to pay in Ghana cedis, but Templeton doesn't use Ghana cedis. So definitely the money will be converted to US dollars before it's taken away. So this is the clear, but it's a CD denominated bond.
All right. Mr. Jackson, wrap up there. I saw you shook your head when the issue of the interest rate dropping.
Not the interest rate, the fact about the public
knowledge of the whole transaction.
And on this case, I will have to disagree with you completely.
We should know.
It is our money.
Yes.
It is our responsibility. It is a bond that has to be honored by whoever is in power 15 years from now. It cannot be shrouded in secrecy.
But you didn't talk about client confidentiality.
No, that's a separate. You asked me whether the banks should come and say something.
That's right.
The person who we have appointed, he has to tell us, right? If there's a negotiation between Ghana and another country, it is the person who did the negotiation for us who has to come and tell us. But put that aside. It should be public. I don't agree that it should be shrouded in secrecy. The issue is simply this. This bond is in cedis. If I'm Templeton, I've taken dollars, brought it to Ghana, and come to buy a bond, which is denominated in cedis.
Yeah. Right.
The 19% should be looked at this. What will happen if the CD goes down? If the CD goes down, Franklin Templeton has lost money. So in looking at your 19% over 15 years, part of the reasoning should be, if I'm bringing dollars to come and buy CDs in Ghana, where would the rate be
in the next 15
15 years from now? And you see, all of a sudden, then when you think in that way, then the considerations may look very different. Because even as we sit today, if you go to the bank and you say, I want to buy CDs a year from today, you know how much they will quote you?
No, they will use the forward rate.
They will use the forward rate. You know how much?
So it will go up.
6 months.
They have to use the forward rate.
The 6 months for which is the rate they
on the
expect
projections.
in future. Do you know how much rate they will give you? 5.4. The
I
rate
see.
today is what?
It's about
4.4.
4.4, yeah.
4.4. The forward rate is 5.4. That means that presumably they're expecting close to a 20%
increase.
Depreciation. So on one hand, if you think about it, if I was
Frank Templeton.
even a 19% may give me a little cost for work.
I see.
You see, the thing that
taking all that into consideration.
The issue also is this. He mentioned concentration. There's a risk there.
Of course.
And that makes sense. But nobody has mentioned concentration in this partisan fight.
No,
there is.
See, that's why that's why I say it is a partisan fight and not a technical fight.
But is it also not because perhaps they don't have the details of
no, you know it is 95% went to 1%. Nobody, all you are doing is seeking to smear the reputations of the representative of the company and and our own minister. If you had our good old doctor on your side, maybe he would have given you a technical angle to make a decision. Because it is partisan, and all you're doing is wanting to score political points. You're looking at how do I get reputations and the
images destroyed.
Please, let's move on.
All right. Moving on, the Business Finder says good times ahead for private sector as ISE predicts 11.2% end-year inflation. The story says that all things being equal, inflation will decline further to 11.2% by the end of 2016. That's according to the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. Now, it says that this should be a welcome news to Ghana's private sector as a drop is said to trigger some easing in base lending rates and increase money supply, which would then mean availability of money for lending. Ghana's inflation outlook has been described by economists as promising on account of government business-friendly posturing since it took over from the previous administration. And the story talks about stability that has led to some analysts describing government's end-year inflation target of 11.2% as not ambitious enough. Now, Mr. Waku, let's start from here. The government's posturing and perhaps the kind of fiscal discipline it talks about seem to be attracting some positives into the Ghanaian economy.
Yeah, it's true. The kind of posturing government has been putting ever since they've been in power is psychologically giving some positive signs to businesses, but the reality is what matters. We are 6 months down the line. Activities of business is not really moving yet. People are still not stable in mind what exactly they should do, whether to really put their investments gears in place or whatever. And the emphasis being laid on the inflation coming down as a
good sign.
As a good sign. I don't know if it's really a good sign in reality, because we have seen inflation rates go as low as single digit before, whereas the lending rates and other rates are far ahead. So whether these two move parallel or they have what kind of relationship they have, needs the businessman on the ground will have to analyze it. Because if we look at our interest rate, even compared to the kind of inflation rates we have today, I don't know how much impact it's making on businesses. We have been in the public sector, I'm in the private sector today, and the reality on the ground is different. So we need to be asking questions whether these economic indicators are really working practically on our ground. Do we have our fundamentals right? Is it really the way to analyze our business environment? If not, what can we do to change the situation? As a business person, that is how I am looking at it. If we still, our rates are still ranging above 28, 30, moving around those areas.
30 and 40 now.
Yes.
Based on perhaps what you're going for.
So if by the end of the year we have inflation at 11, what effect is it going to have on real businesses on the ground?
I see.
Yeah.
Dr. Mensah, so the fact that inflation is dropping, but lending rates, the base rates and others are still high, is Mr. Waku's argument that we have seen it before, it was a single digit, and yet we didn't see the gains. So
interest rates
should we be shouting hallelujah because inflation is dropping?
Well, ideally, in an ideal environment, if inflation is coming down, it's a good news to the private sector. One, you see the real value of your investment as a private man. So you're not looking at the nominal sense of investment. You're looking at the real, value after taking into consideration your, what do you call it, inflation. I've taken into consideration inflation. Now, on the other hand, remember, Ghana, we do inflation targeting policy, rate.
Right.
So possibly if inflation comes down, we expect that the monetary policy rate, okay, which is the base rate for most of the financial transactions at the upper level, will come down. So coming down, we're looking at a situation where, now this same monetary policy rate that we are talking about feeds into the bank's base rate. Okay, in fact, there's a strong, it's a one-to-one relationship.
Right.
One-to-one relationship. So it's a strong link between the base rate of the banks. Then you ask yourself, why would interest rates remain high? Now,
if the base rate has gone down.
If the base rate has gone down. Now we're looking at, after the base rate, the risk premium, okay, of the banks, which depends on the borrower himself, or borrower specific, if I should put it that way.
You're suggesting the risk is still high?
Yes, the risk is high as far as what? Individual borrowing is concerned. So at the bank level, looking at, you know, the base rate, and then how it fits into, looking at the monetary policy rate as a result of inflation coming down, it has also come down, and how it fits into the base rate. But then you look at the base rate, and then something we call the big risk premium in pricing of loans, okay? If the borrower's specific, you know, risk is very high, you cannot afford to lower, you know, interest rate on that side. The base rate can come down, all right, but at the individual level, we don't have very good address system. Businesses that are operating are afraid to keep records of their earnings, and then all those things that they suppose, records of all those things that they're supposed to do to attract funding, you know, in a soft way, they're not doing it. Then you should expect that interest rate was to remain high. But then under normal circumstance, in ideal situation, we expect that inflation going down. Well, but then let me add this. You know, we're looking at end of year inflation coming to what? 11.2%. Now, when you take macroeconomic variables and how it tickles down to, you know, let me put it, the local level, there's something we call the lead and the lag effect. It might come down at that moment, but what's the fluidity of funds, okay, moving from the central bank all the way to the banks, and then the banks, you know, trying to identify who they can lend to, okay, as a result of you doing their credit risk, you know, analysis within the bank. And then, you know, that takes a lot of, you know, energy, let me say, a lot of input to do that, okay? And then coming back to down to the low, it would take you about 6 months or a year. So the fact that we see inflation coming down, we see an economic indicator coming down, you know, momentarily, does not mean that we should feel the impact now. We're looking at
it will take us time.
Some time. An effect that will happen over some time.
I see.
Mr.
Jackson, so from Dr. Mensah's argument, if the non-performing loans are still crippling the banks, inflation can go as low as maybe 0%, and yet nobody will be smiling. No private sector person will be smiling.
See, first of all, as a private sector person, you don't care about inflation. Literally, no inflation you go chop. Yes. It's the truth of the matter. What really matters to you? Well, inflation won't matter, but it's a very abstract, concept, inflation. And let me tell you, as a private sector person, there's some things they look at. What's the cost of borrowing? What's the cost of the CD? Those are the issues that concern them on a day-to-day basis.
But are they not tied to inflation?
They are. Inflation is not yes, it's tied to inflation. It may be tied to velocity of money, fluidity, GDP. You see, truly, the man in the street, he does not care. All he cares for is, what's the CD today? What is my bank asking me to borrow? I have some goods at the port. I want to clear.
Where do I get money quick?
I have some inputs that I'm bringing in. Where do I get money? How do I've done some contracts for the government, or are they paying me? And when are they going to pay me? Those are really the considerations that this business faces from day to day. Whether you are a salon or a barber shop who has to get some cream for the ladies' hair, or you are a manufacturing entity based in Tema. So it's a good sign. We all appreciate inflation targeting coming down. But I assure you, no business is looking at this headline and shouting hallelujah.
Let me come in here.
Dr. Mensah, you can, because I'm struggling to understand how Mr. Jackson wants to delink inflation going down to businesses being excited.
It is a sign, but it is only a sign. It doesn't make any difference to me. As a farmer, think about it as a farmer. I'm a farmer. I see some clouds forming in the. I look at it.
It should make you happy.
how make me happy. It is only when the rain falls that I am happy and I can start thinking about planting.
So he's looking at what we are expecting and then the realization of it.
Yes.
Is that not so?
This one is a good thing. The economists will get excited. Those of us who are too known and think we know something will get excited. I assure you, no business person in town goes to the market today, goes to the office today, and hears inflation target at the end of the year is 11 and starts to jump up and down and offer his staff a bonus.
Yes, I'll come back. But if we look at what Mr. Jackson is saying, that this is a sign, then again we see government, the kind of fiscal policy we're seeing in terms of making sure we don't overspend. Perhaps if you put all that together, government posture, the fiscal policy it is pursuing, that sign should be a good sign for businesses to begin to smile.
The government is not spending.
We're trying to ensure fiscal discipline.
You hear what the businessman says? That government is not spending, that his bills are not being paid. That is his first consideration, not inflation.
Not inflation. And the reality is that, like Doc is saying, all his analysis, we agree with him on in book. Like the economists will say, when after all this analysis, when the reality dawn on them, they will say, all things being constant, or you hold the issues which are real, then we talk about the argument they want to make. If we live in an economy where government is the major spending officer, if government is not spending, businesses don't drive.
I see.
Businesses don't drive. If government is not...
The government will be spending, but spend wisely.
No problem.
Efficient allocation.
Yes.
Efficient allocation.
We agree. As for the sake of this
prioritize
argument,
your spending.
For this sake, the sake of this argument, we are assuming government is spending appropriately.
Okay.
We are not talking about corruption.
Wasteful spending.
No.
Okay, right.
If government is spending, it opens up the economy. Private people are working because even going back to doctor's analysis on the base rate and the risk factors, if you have a base rate which is about 25 or 26, and you are taking a risk of 4%, is it the risk factor that is making the rate so high, or the base rate is already high? And if we are saying the risks include the private businesses are not keeping records, or they are not doing some fundamental things very well.
To attract,
Yes, we'll soon come to that, but the question is, look at the structure of our economy. The private sector is the largest employer. Who is helping them? What effort are we doing to restructure that sector so that it will comply with what the banks or the lending institutions are expecting from them? If a farmer is trying to grow his farm, now we are saying we must increase development or agri-sector. We must try to commercialize those side of the businesses. What effort are we doing to structure those sectors very well that they will be compliant with the bank requirements? And if, like we are saying, the base rate is already high, how much is that person going to take to structure his business and make profit to come and pay? So there are big issues we will think about as far as our rates are concerned.
Okay.
I want to make a little contribution here.
Right.
You see, it's fine for inflation to go down. But suppose I'm a financial institution, and I come from a financial institution, and I want to lend to the agri sector. I want to listen to the encouragement being given by everybody. I want to lend to the agri sector. When I came here, I mentioned one thing, the army worm.
Yes.
As I sit today, I have on my desk some applications from the agri sector for lending. I'm looking at them with a jaundiced eye, because it is not just a matter of take money and give to them, because the money comes from somebody else. It is also the matter of, okay, even if everything is right, If the army worm is going to destroy the crops, then maybe I have no business lending to the farmers.
Yeah.
So you see, it's not, so as far as that farmer or that rice mill or he's concerned, sitting in Tamale, etc., inflation is not what matters. What matters is, will my company lend to him? And at what rate? And they want to buy combined harvesters. What is the dollar rate for the combined harvesters they want to buy from India?
But the dollar rate inflation goes in price. No?
Yes, but that is what, you see, so those are the real issues. Inflation coming down is great, but a lot more needs to happen before the businesses start shouting hallelujah.
Let's wrap up.
Let me chip in this with what Mr. Jackson is saying about agriculture sector. You know, we're looking at the private sector, but then what is the fraction of the private, the agriculture in the private sector? Most of the private sector activities that we think the private sector dominates is still the services.
The service industry.
Okay, agriculture is just a fraction of it. But then, unfortunate thing with our environment is that we've left agriculture at the mercy of nature, which becomes difficult when you want to ensure your crop yield.
Or you want to refinance them.
When you want to refinance them, like Mr. Jackson is saying. So, no insurance company or no financier will finance something that nature has control over. At least man should have control over it. So I believe that we can help the agriculture sector, like they are all propagating, by the government instituting some policies. So for instance, one dam, one village.
One dam, one village.
It's
very excited.
It's a fantastic,
but it hasn't kicked off.
It's a fantastic idea. External services training, to ensure that the right amount of fertilizers are applied so that they don't come and kill Ghanaians in the long run. There are some basic things that needs to be in place before they can attract funds from the banks.
I see. Now, apart from that good news, the story, ISE also warns government, and particularly with the public sector debt. It says that the public debt is estimated to be above 122 billion as at the end of December 31, 2016, and now stands at 127.1 billion as at May 2017. Now, ISE is saying that the debt service cost, ISE said, is among the fastest growing item of expenditure, and it goes on to say that now government pension to resort to external borrowing poses a microeconomic risk. So on the one side, inflation is going down. ISE says that is exciting to the private sector. But then it warns government about the debt stock and then the continued borrowing from the external spot. Now, government is bent on achieving its development goals. If we go there and we're in trouble, how do we do it? Mr. Waku, how do we get resources to develop and still not go into the danger? It says warning the pension to go to the external sources to borrow every day.
That's good. Unfortunately, ISE is warning, but they didn't provide a solution to that. We all know this is the problem we have. There's only two ways you can pay your debt. Either you have increased your...
Okay, I'm not cutting, but ISE says that the only way out is for government to first raise the balance of payments, constraints on demand, and then put an ice on appetite for borrowing. That's what ISE's recommendation.
Yeah, but what is there? What really? How does it really solve this problem? You see, it's easy to make some of these recommendations. I've entered into business before I understand some of this issue. If you are a businessman and the whole month, for whatever reason, you have made no business, you have no profit, but the month is ending and you must pay salary. That is where you see the reality of some of these things government face. Look at government. We are all aware that government is the largest employer and spend over 60% of inflows, or if it's in revenue to pay salaries. And we are talking about development, we are talking about running government machinery and everything. Much as we all appreciate there's corruption and other things, life must continue whilst you think about solving the other problem. So looking at it from a small businessman point of view, I think governments have a bigger responsibility. There is no way government can stop borrowing. I think, fine, the borrowing must be channeled into more developmental ventures, which can increase revenue generation, which can increase tax from the private sector. So if you ask even my opinion, this long-term borrowing we are doing, or government is doing, government can structure that, borrow, give it to private sector, so that...
I remember the borrowing is recovering some debt.
Is to pay off some debt.
It depends on what you are borrowing for. You can borrow to pay debt. You can borrow for infrastructure development. You can borrow to expand.
To align some policies.
But is it right to be borrowing to defray debt?
Which country in this world doesn't borrow to
pay off something?
To pay off something or to develop. Everywhere you go, they borrow to develop. I don't think our borrowing is up to what Dubai does. They borrow, but they use it to develop, and businesses.
America does.
Yes, and businesses increase, businesses pay tax, businesses make profit, and the economy expands. If we borrow just to be paying debt, that one at a point you will be crushed. But if you borrow to expand your economy and develop, and businesses are booming, employment increase, everybody, every activity is moving on well, and we put our systems in place that you can track the little taxes you can pick from anywhere, government revenue will increase. So eventually, you don't borrow to pay the debt. You use your domestic generation.
Expand them. Mr. Jackson, before Dr. Mensah will come in, so we can stop borrowing, or perhaps we need to look at what we
see, look at it. The argument he's making makes sense. That let's borrow so that we can grow bigger. That is why our borrowing is measured as a percentage of your GDP.
Economic output.
Because if all you do is to earn 1,000 cedis a month, you can keep borrowing. By the time your borrowing now starts to hit what you owe, starts to hit what you can pay, and now you have to, all your 1,000 cedis has to go into servicing debt, then I will say that you have overborrowed. Whether it's at 1,000 cedis or it is at 100,000 cedis.
You have overborrowed.
You have overborrowed because you have to look at it with what you have, what you earn. That is why we look at borrowing as a percentage of GDP.
But it is, if it is to expand your business,
so your business will expand. So at a certain point, the borrowing as a percentage of the size of your business should drop, isn't it?
Right.
Good. So as a nation, the borrowing as a percentage of the size of the economy should drop. What we see is that borrowing...
Well, it depends. If the economy is growing...
If the economy is growing over time...
And you maintain your borrowing, then you are likely to see that drop.
Yes. But what will happen is that we are borrowing so fast that the borrowing is always becoming bigger and bigger as a percentage of the economy.
And yet the economy is same.
The economy is the same.
It's not expanding that fast.
And that is where the problem is. Now, what the economists say is this. You have hit a critical point too. Now, the borrowing as a percentage of your, it is number three.
So
what they are saying is that, listen, it is good to want to do all these great, fantastic things.
Right.
But, my brother,
take your time.
Take your time. You have no money. take your time so that the good things you are doing can start to bear fruit before you go back and borrow more. In any case, when you came, there was some debt that your ancestors have left you. That has to be paid. Whether it was used for good or bad, it's not even the issue anymore.
Okay.
It is there.
Let me pick some thought from Dr. Mensah quickly before we check some comments coming.
Right. I think we need to be careful here how we look at the debt to our GDP ratio, in a sense that if you take our debt as we speak now, the government is not borrowing for any developmental, plans.
For now.
More or less trying to, because before this government came to power, the structures were that, we are fiscally squeezed in terms of the space that we
don't have money.
Exactly. So more or less, let's find a way to restructure our debt. So most of the debt that were, within 5 years to 7 years and all those, let's try to move them to long term, so that
go back and negotiate,
renegotiate exactly
to give you more space.
Exactly, so that we can have the room. Over time, the funds that we generate, we don't necessarily have to use everything to pay our debt. But then we can still channel some into our developmental plans, and then also still service our debt bit by bit for the 15 years. And so the current administration, the first borrowing that they did, I see it to be in that direction. And for us, I think for me, is in a good, but then the caution that Issa is sounding here, I'm very happy with it, in the sense that more or less you're trying to borrow to restructure your debt. You have to be careful. There's a threshold that you are getting into. So take your time. It's not every debt that you need to restructure. You can some debt you have to take them as bull by the horn. Take them, settle them in a short term, and then we move forward.
One danger we are facing is that if you look at the structure of our debt now, there's a bunching up around the 15-year period.
Right.
So
much to pay around that time.
So for me, 15 years. Maybe I'll be in retirement. For you,
but you still be paying.
Younger man, you are still very active, and there's a huge debt for you to pay.
On my neck. All right. Okay. Amma Ajima has said, Amma, let's see some of the comments coming.
Yeah, so some comments. This is coming from Joy Jachi. She says, can't wait for my new day. Also from Kobe Town. TV3, you are the best TV station in Ghana. A TV station with no antenna you can watch. Keep it up. Graduate unemployment is gradually suffocating the youth of this country to death. We members of the Unemployed Teachers Association are appealing to the general public to support the association to pressurize government to employ and post all distance and sandwich education trainee teachers to teach in the poorly staffed public schools across Ghana. That's from Al-Hassan Bako, president of the association. And there's a picture of Nanekia Mensah Brampa. It's her birthday today, as well as Rawat Burai, whose birthday it is today. Bright. Marauding unemployment has caused depressive feeling amongst distance and sandwich education graduates. We members of the Unemployed Teachers Association are putting it to the Ministry of Education and the Ghana Education Service to employ and post all professional teachers from the country's sandwich and distance education programs to teach in the public schools throughout the country. Failure to do so will trigger an explosive demonstration. Again from Al-Hassan Bako. Good morning. Please, we YEA are suffering. So when are they paying us? Going to work without pay in 4 months. Tikuma in Northern region. Well, Bright, I hand over to you.
Okay, well, a lot more of your comments are in there. Unfortunately, we've run out of able to read some of them, but we're grateful that you joined the conversation. My guest this morning, Mr. David Waku, is a group president of Wealth Vision Financial Services Limited. Mr. Waku, grateful for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Mr. Joe Jackson speaks a lot about finance. You know him on TV, and so thanks for your time this morning too.
Good to be here.
You always be welcome here. And the Dr. Lord Mensah is a senior lecturer at University of Ghana Business School. Grateful you joined us this morning.
Thank you.
Right. And for you out there, we're grateful for your stay with us. Stay on because there are some sports coming up.